Hey guys, sylentshooter here with another episode of my Battlefield 2 Editor Tips and Tricks series. Today I'm going to be showing you how to stitch your primary and secondary terrain together. This is the manual method. You will need Photoshop and the Battlefield 2 Editor, but there are automatic ways of doing this. I don't recommend them, however, because they basically just flip your primary terrain and it makes it look very crappy. First thing you need to do is open up Photoshop. It doesn't matter what version you have as long as it can work with raw files. And the second thing you're going to need to do is open up the folder containing your level. Now basically, I've already gone ahead and done this, which is right here. And you're going to be looking for your raw primary and secondary terrain height maps, sorry about that. What you need to do is open up your height map primary, and it has to be the raw file. If it does not say that Photoshop can open it, just right click on it and say open with, or use the open with dialog box to basically choose Photoshop. Now I'm going to go ahead and open this. And this box will pop up. And normally it will say that the depth is at 8 bits and the count is 2. Now you're going to want to change this to what I have here, as count being 1 and depth 16 bits. This will open up the byte order, and you can choose that to be IBM PC, and if you don't, it will not look correct. Now don't resize the image at all and just press OK. Now that your primary terrain has been opened up in Photoshop, you're going to want to go back to your folder and select the secondary terrain file that you want to use. One thing to remember that in Photoshop, the height map raws are flipped, but we're going to be working with them in that flipped method as not to confuse you guys. Now I'm going to be opening up my height map secondary right 1, which will be right here on my map. It'll continue right there. Now, there are different ways of doing this, but I definitely recommend doing it this way because, again, it'll look really weird if you don't use these channels. Basically, what you want is to not touch the width or the height, leave it as 257. Like I said earlier, they are a lower quality than the primary terrain. That's why it's a lower dimension. Change the depth to 8 bits and the count as 1 as well. Don't change it to 16 bits. It will not open because it is not a 16-bit file. Press OK, and that will open that file. Now, mine's all black because I just made it water in my map. What we're going to be doing today, though, is changing it to go with this. The mountains I have here and the ocean here and the flat area here. I'm going to be adding that kind of in this area. Now we will want to resize our primary terrain to the size of our secondary terrain, which if you recall was 257 pixels. You want to go to image, and then you're going to want to go to image size and change that to 257. Make sure that it's constrained. Resolution doesn't have to change. And just press OK. Now we're going to open up a new file, go to File, New, and make the width 514 pixels and the height 257, and make sure the color mode is in grayscale and it's in 8-bit. If it's in 16-bit, then we have to do a lot of different things to change it back to 8-bit. It gets really confusing. Just make sure it's 8-bit and it's just easy. Press OK, and there we go. We have a new map. Now what we're going to do is go back to our height map secondary, which in this case, if you recall, I used the right one. See this little background thing here? What you're going to want to do is hold down click, and drag the lock to the delete, which will make it a layer. Now what you're going to do is go to Filter, Render, Clouds. One thing I forgot to mention, make sure that your texture palette is black and white, and then we're going to go back to Filter, Render again, Difference Clouds. Now, I would definitely recommend keep doing this if it looks like what you want it to. If I go back to my primary, I can see if I zoom in that it's not quite the same at all. So I'm going to maybe render that out again, and that seems like it's a little better. Like I said, this is something that you can change quite easily. And it's definitely something I will be changing. Now, press Control A, which will select all of your layer, and press Control C, which will copy it. Then go into the new file you opened and press Control V to paste that in there, and make sure you just move it to the right so it snaps. Go back to your height map primary, Control A again, Control C, go to your new one, and Control V, paste that in, and move that to the left. Now you can zoom in a bit and see how completely different this looks. Like I said earlier, though, we will be changing that. Now make sure you have your layer 2 selected, which is your primary terrain, and you're going to want to zoom in until you see a pixel grid, probably around 200%, or 1200%, sorry. And you're going to go scroll up, and you might want to hide layer 1. It makes it a little easier. And what we're going to do is select the first row of pixels, or maybe in this case the second row. Depends on what your map is like, but I'm going to choose the second row and the first row just because it'll make it look a little better when I actually load my new secondary terrain. Now with that selected, you're going to want to go to the selection, which is a little arrow above the marquee tool. Make sure that's selected. Hold down your Alt key and press on the right arrow key, and this will basically copy the pixel values over. Do it about maybe 10 times, just so it overlaps with the new with your secondary terrain that you made in the previous step. That's done, and it looks very blurry, I know, but the thing is that this will make our secondary terrain look a lot better. Okay, if you just want to zoom out again, you can deselect that, and what we're going to be doing is selecting, by holding down Control, layer 1. If you click on the little icon here, it will just select the square that we want to have selected. Now what we can do is basically hold down Control Shift I and press delete, which will delete the primary terrain from our new file. Now deselect everything and make sure you're on layer 2. Now press Control E, which will merge layer 2 and layer 1 together. And just make sure that's selected again. Now, if you've read some tutorials on this, you will know that the raw map is basically working like this. The white represents high points, the black represents low points. So all of this right here is going to be mountains in my map, which is right in the ocean, which makes no sense. So I'm just going to roughly draw that out. You're going to want to go to your brush tool and select your size of brush. I'm going to use probably a bigger one. Keyboard shortcut for raising the size of this is your square bracket keys, which doesn't seem to want to work right now for whatever reason. Anyways, make that bigger, maybe 20, 18. And I'm just going to quickly draw this shoreline here. Just fill that in. Black is lowest point again, and this will be covered by water in my secondary and primary terrain. Scroll over, zoom in a little bit, and you may want to resize your brush here. Just kind of match that up. Okay, now that that's done, we can go next to the favorites part of mine. Shouldn't have deselected that. Select that again, zoom in, and you're going to use the smudge tool, which is this little finger thing, and you're going to basically draw from the left to the right as much as you want. Say a lot more. You wanted this. This is going to blend the flat areas to the higher areas in my mat. Now, this probably won't be perfect for the purpose of this tutorial. I'll try my best. Maybe should have rendered the height map a little differently, but keep dragging that across. That will make a nice little drag the water up too. That'll make a nice shoreline. See how it's making that gray? You want that to be darker, so it's a nice gradual ascension through those mountains along the shore. We'll drag that up there. Keep dragging that so it looks nice. That looks pretty good. Maybe continue down here. Like I said, it's something that's really easy to do. It doesn't take a lot of skill. It's just basically getting the colors to look relatively the same. Now, if you don't want mountains, then you can always change the clouds. I'll go Shift-I. You can change the filter to, instead of having black and white, to a gray. To make black and gray. There we go. Render again. Clouds. Filter. Render difference clouds. And it's darker. Maybe not as dark as it should be. Filter. Render difference clouds. It's getting darker. But anyways, you can do it that way. Just delete that. And it'll make it look more like what you have in your primary terrain. Now if I go back to my primary, this is still selected. Press Control-C again. I'm going to copy this back into here so I get an idea of what it looks like. As you can see, there's that ledge right there, those pixels, those white ones that we're going to have to get out of there. But apart from that, it looks pretty good. What I'm going to do is select my first layer again, which is my new secondary terrain. And you see my primary terrain how this is all just one color. It doesn't gradually slope up or anything. It's perfectly flat. Now what I'm going to do is take my brush tool again, hold down Alt, which will bring up your color picker tool, sorry. Make sure you have layer 2 selected again, and just select that color right there. There we go. Go to your brush, which is already layer 1 again, and just paint that so that you have that shoreline relatively flat again. There we go. Go back to your blur, blur that into the mountains. You can see better that way. Again, you want that nice gradual slope. If you're going from a higher point to a lower point, slope into the higher point. if you're going from a lower point to a higher point. In this case, it's lower, so I'm going to slope this way a little bit. And slope the terrain in the ocean to my shoreline, so it just doesn't have a cliff that drops off. It would look really weird. Okay, now as you can see, I have this mountain here. It's going to actually look pretty good. Maybe I'll just blur this area over here so it doesn't look just like a random mountain. It just kind of falls off the edge of everything. Blur that shoreline again. Okay. Now, I'll go here and blur that up. Excuse me. If you make a mistake, use Control-Z or Control-Alt-Z, which will just undo that. It's just common Photoshop tools. That looks a little better. Okay. That's not bad. We can always change it in the editor. You can change secondary terrain in the editor, but I think I'm going to leave it like this for now. I might just make it a little darker, however. If I choose my lasso tool, unselect that, choose my lasso tool, and just select gradually the really highlighted area. You can do it that way and go to Image, Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast, and bring that brightness down a little. And you select that, and then just blur that in. Or you can use another method of selecting only the high points, which is useful too. I'm just going to blur this in first. There we go. Go to Select, Color Range, and then choose the white. And then you can change the fuzziness to select only the really high points. And press OK. And you have that selected, and then you can change that again via Image, Adjustments, Brightness. Change that down a little. It's quite simple, actually. And there we go. Okay, so we can now delete layer 2 again, because I think it looks pretty good. And we will continue on to the next step. Okay, so the next step, we will be making this new terrain our secondary terrain. So what you're going to want to do is hold down Control, select that icon again, select that icon, Control V, Control C, and then go to Height Map Secondary, Right 1, or whichever one you're working in again, and just paste that in with Control V. Now you can delete the first layer. Actually, leave that first layer. Sometimes it helps if you have white on the edges, as I do. And what we'll do now is go to File, Save As, keep the name the same, go to Photoshop Raw, make sure it's in that folder where you have all your height maps, save that, yes, and leave it this way. Make sure it's in interleaved and not non-interleaved, and press OK. Photoshop will save that. Now you can exit everything. You don't have to save the PSD files. If you want, you can. And then we will open up the Battlefield 2 editor. Okay, so I've loaded my map up in the Battlefield 2 editor and moved to the spot where my surrounding terrain will be. And we're going to want to go to Render, Surrounding Terrain, and Toggle Draw All. And there's our surrounding terrain. Now you'll notice that we have these little really sharp ledges here, and we can change that in the editor just by going to the terrain editor. And going to the smooth option, increasing the brush size and strength to about 85. And we'll just go like so, which will change our primary and our secondary terrain. That basically is together now. Make sure that your brush is constantly on the primary terrain side. As you can see, there's a lot of different nodes, and when we go to secondary, it goes down to a lot. That's because the secondary, as I mentioned earlier, is way less detailed. Now you'll notice it is a different color. That's because I haven't generated the light maps for the secondary terrain, nor have I actually painted the secondary terrain. I'll go over that in a different tutorial. But basically, you just want to continue to do that. Match up those edges. Make it nice and smooth, not out of place. And there's our mountain that we made. Very nice mountain. Some dark spots. What you'll notice is that the area that we made ocean is actually not, in fact, any water in there. That will come when we actually go in-game, not now. We'll just continue doing this. Smoothing that out. Nice and smooth. That is key here, to make everything nice and smooth. Because if it doesn't look nice and smooth, obviously it just looks crappy. Do that. Now, these big ones are kind of difficult, but you can still use the smooth tool. That's why we chose the really high brush strength for the smooth tool. Let's continue doing that. Don't go to the edges when you don't have other terrain, or else it'll smooth down. Just like the normal smooth tool usage in the editor. And just go over that, make sure it's nice and smooth and matches. And like I said earlier, you can always change the terrain. Just use Battlefield 2T Paint to change the terrain color of the secondary terrain and your primary terrain. And if you light map it, it'll look a lot nicer too. And basically, that is it. That is the tutorial on how to stitch your secondary terrain to your primary terrain using Photoshop. So you get a really nice job. It looks good. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you guys learned something. I hope it definitely helped. I know it helped me when I figured this out. Spent like an hour and a half on the internet trying to find a different method. Anyways, thanks again for watching.